outside is still held in the soft, velvet embrace of the deepest night. And as you settle into your blankets, imagine a small, timber-framed workshop nestled at the edge of a sleeping village, where the air is cool and the stars are beginning to fade into a soft, hazy gray. Inside the workshop, the air is thick with the comforting, clean scent of fresh pine, aged oak, and sweet cedar that lingers in the rafters like a quiet memory. A single beam of moonlight filters through the small glass window, catching the fine, golden dust motes that dance in the perfectly still air. And the room feels like a sanctuary of peace, where time is slowed down to the pace of a single, quiet breath. You're invited now to let your own breath slow down to match the steady, peaceful beat of the resting world, and to drift away into the gentle, repetitive motions of the Carpenter's quiet day, feeling perfectly safe and perfectly still. Chapter 1. The Carpenter stirs in his small bed long before the sun has thought to crest the distant, sleeping hills, his eyes opening slowly to the familiar sight of the heavy oak beams above his head. And he feels a deep, heavy sense of calm as he pushes back the thick wool blankets to stand on the cool, solid floorboards of his room. He dresses in the dim light, his fingers moving with a quiet and practiced memory over the soft linen of his tunic and the worn leather of his belt. And the house remains entirely silent around him, a stillness that feels like a physical presence, pressing gently and kindly against his skin as he moves toward the workshop where the wood is kept. He walks with soft, rhythmic footsteps, the transition from the bedroom to the shop marked by a subtle change in the air, which grows cooler and smells of the damp earth and the sweet, resinous scent of sawdust that has settled over everything like a layer of silent, fallen snow. In the center of the room stands the great wooden workbench, its surface scarred and smooth from years of use. And the carpenter reaches for his first task, which is the slow and meditative sharpening of his tools. He takes a heavy iron chisel in his calloused hand, feeling the weight of the cold steel, and he places it carefully against the oil-slicked surface of the whetstone, hearing the soft, rhythmic slide of metal against grit, a sound that is like the ocean far away, or the breathing of a giant. Slide, lift, slide, lift, and he does this again and again, watching the silver edge become bright and sharp in the dim morning light. The oil on the stone is dark and thick, and as he moves the blade in small, hypnotic circles, he feels the vibration of the stone in his fingers, a low and steady hum that seems to travel up his arms and settle in his chest, making him feel as though he is a part of the workbench itself. He repeats this process with each tool, the saws and the planes and the small, delicate carving knives, laying them out in a neat and orderly line on the table where they catch the first pale light of the dawn. Once the tools are ready, he turns to the wood, a large and heavy plank of seasoned oak that has been waiting in the corner for its time to be worked. And he runs his hand over the rough surface, feeling the ridges of the grain and the coolness of the timber. He lifts the plank with a slow and steady strength, carrying it to the bench where he sets it down with a muffled, solid thud. And he stands for a moment, just looking at the patterns in the wood, the swirls and the knots that tell the story of 100 years of forest growth. The air in the workshop is beginning to brighten as the first hint of sun filters through the high, narrow window, casting long and soft shadows that stretch across the floor to touch the far corners where the baskets of shavings and the empty crates wait in their own patient silence. He feels the coolness of the morning air on his face and the warmth of his own steady breath, a perfect balance of sensations that makes him feel grounded and safe, anchored in a moment of time that belongs only to him and the quiet preparations of the work. There is no hurry, no need to rush, for the wood has waited a long time to become a chair or a table, and it will wait a little longer while the carpenter prepares his heart for the day. He touches the edge of the wood once more, feeling the potential hidden inside the rough bark, and he begins to mark the lines for the first cuts with a small piece of charcoal, the black dust leaving a soft trail on the golden surface. Every motion is part of a long, unbroken chain of mornings, a ritual that brings a sense of order and peace to his soul, and he feels the weight of the world's noise falling away, leaving only this quiet room and the soft, repetitive setup of his craft. He moves to the shelf to fetch a small pot of tallow, his boots making a soft, rhythmic creak on the floor, and he greases the blades of his saws, watching the way the fat clings to the metal and makes it shine. He is ready now. The workshop is ready, and the day is unfolding exactly as it should, one slow and gentle movement at a time, while the stars remain hidden but near in the growing light of the sky. Chapter 2. The sun has climbed a little higher, casting a warm, buttery light across the workshop table. begins the long and meditative process of sawing through the heavy oak. His hands grasping the wooden handle of the saw with a slow and deliberate strength that feels like the turning of a great, silent wheel. He leans his weight forward, pushing the blade into the wood, and the saw makes a rhythmic, shushing sound that fills the quiet room. A pattern that has no beginning and no end, only the steady and hypnotic rhythm of his own breathing and the soft heartbeat of the timber. The wood resists just a little, a solid and yielding pushback that makes his muscles feel warm and engaged in a way that is deeply satisfying and calm. And he folds his focus entirely into the motion of his arm, watching the fine, golden sawdust fall in a gentle and silent stream to the floor. The curls of wood begin to pile up around his boots, looking like tiny autumn leaves caught in a draft, and the scent of the oak becomes stronger, a deep and earthy aroma that smells of the rain and the sun and the deep roots of the earth. He pauses occasionally to wipe the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, his skin feeling warm and damp. And then he returns to the rhythm, the saw becoming an extension of his own body as he moves in harmony with the grain. The light in the room is changing now, the pale yellow of morning turning into a soft and rich gold as the hours pass in a blur of quiet productivity. And the dust motes in the air dance in the thick beams of light, moving in slow and lazy spirals that mirror the carpenter's own repetitive movements. After the sawing is finished, he takes up the hand plane, a heavy block of wood with a sharp silver blade, and he begins to smooth the surface of the timber, moving the plane in long, sweeping strokes that make a sound like the rustling of silk against a stone. With each pass of the plane, a thin, translucent shaving of wood curls up and away, falling softly to the bench, and the surface beneath becomes as smooth and cool as the surface of a mountain lake. He touches the wood with his fingertips, feeling the incredible silkiness of the grain, the way it seems to glow from within. And he moves his hand back and forth, enjoying the tactile sensation of a job done with patience and care. The workshop feels like a sanctuary, a place where the clocks of the world have stopped, and the only measure of time is the slow, invisible change of the raw timber into a finished piece of art. And the carpenter lets his mind drift into a state of absolute stillness. He does not think about the finished chair or the person who will sit in it. He only thinks about the current stroke of the plane, the current curl of wood, the current breath in his lungs. The warmth from the window wraps around him like a heavy wool blanket, making his limbs feel loose and relaxed even as he works. And he finds that his thoughts are as quiet and clear as the air in the rafters. He takes a small chisel carve a decorative curve into the leg of the piece, the hammer tapping gently against the handle with a soft, melodic clink, 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 and he watches as the wood chips fly away like tiny birds, leaving behind a shape that is graceful and curved. Every motion is slow, every motion is deliberate, and the world outside the stone walls feels like a distant and unimportant dream, far removed from this circle of light and wood. He finishes the carving and runs his thumb over the new edge, feeling the sharpness and the smoothness meeting in a perfect line. And he feels a deep and humming peace that radiates out from his chest to his very fingertips. The day is moving at the pace of the wood, a slow and ancient tempo that allows for no stress and no worry, only the steady and repetitive dance of the hands and the tools. He stands back for a moment to look at his work, the sun catching the golden hues of the oak, and he breathes in the stillness, letting it fill his lungs and slow his pulse until he is nearly as still as the trees themselves, waiting for the next step with a heart that is full and a mind that is quiet. Chapter 3. The afternoon sun has begun its long and lazy slide toward the horizon. The light in the workshop turning from gold to a deep, warm amber. And the carpenter begins the final, quiet tasks of the evening with a body that feels heavy and pleasantly tired. He takes a soft cloth and a small jar of linseed oil, and he begins to rub the oil into the wood, his hand moving in slow, circular motions that make the grain of the oak leap into life with a rich and dark brilliance. The smell of the oil is nutty and sweet, mixing with the scent of the wood to create a fragrance that is deeply comforting and safe. And he watches as the timber drinks in the moisture, becoming darker and smoother with every pass of his hand, round and round, soft and slow, a movement that is as hypnotic as the waves of the sea. Once the wood is glowing with a deep and quiet luster, he begins the slow, rhythmic cleaning of his sanctuary, taking a broom made of dried reeds to sweep the piles of golden shavings into a neat corner. The sound of the bristles against the stone, a rhythmic and soothing hush, 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 that lulls the spirit into a deeper state of calm. He gathers his tools one by one, wiping each each blade with a clean cloth to remove the dust and the oil, and he places them back in their wooden racks with a quiet and final precision, hearing the soft click of metal against wood as each one finds its home. He washes his hands in a basin of cool water, watching the white dust of the oak dissolve and disappear. And the feeling of the water on his skin is incredibly refreshing and light, washing away the remnants of the day's labor and leaving him feeling clean and heavy-limbed. He hangs his leather apron on its peg, feeling the weight of it leave his shoulders, and he turns his attention to the workshop window, watching as the last rays of the sun disappear behind the trees and the first stars begin to twinkle in the darkening sky. The world outside is growing quiet now, the birds tucking their heads under their wings and the evening mist rolling in from the river. And the carpenter feels a profound sense of peace, a quiet joy that comes from a day spent in simple, honest work. He extinguishes the single tallow candle, leaving only the soft, blue light of the moon to fill the room. And he stands for a moment in the doorway, looking back at his tools and the half-finished chair, all resting in the soft shadows of the twilight. His body feels delightfully tired, a warm sensation that starts in his feet and moves all the way up to his back, making him long for the softness of his bed and the deep, dreamless sleep that follows a day of peace. He walks slowly through the house, his movements quiet and respectful of the stillness. And as he enters his bedroom, the scent of the wood still clings to his hair and his skin, a comforting reminder of the forest and the bench. He climbs into his bed, the linen sheets feeling cool and crisp at first, but quickly warming to the heat of his body as he pulls the thick wool blankets up to his chin, tucking them in around his shoulders until he is encased in a cocoon of warmth. He lies there for a moment with his eyes open, looking at the dim outlines of his room, the familiar shapes of the chest and the chair, and the heavy beams above him. His muscles feel loose and relaxed, every tension of the day melting away into the soft mattress, and he lets his head sink into the pillow, his thoughts slowing down until they are nothing more than the gentle pulse of his own heartbeat. The silence of the cottage is total, a deep and liquid quiet that fills his ears and his heart. And he knows that the wood is resting on the bench, the tools are resting in their racks, and the world is exactly as it should be. He closes his eyes and breathes in the faint scent of cedar that lingers on his blanket. And as the house settles around him with a final, gentle sigh, he drifts off into a sleep that is as deep and solid as the oak he has spent his day tending. He feels the house around him, a sturdy shell of timber and stone, protecting him from the wind and the night. And he sinks further into the softness of the bed, his breath becoming a slow, rhythmic wave that carries him away. The world is far away now, a distant and hazy place that has no power over the stillness of his room. And he is a part of the night, a part of the wood, and a part of the peace that remains when the work is done. Sleep comes to him like a slow tide, washing over him and pulling him down into the beautiful, heavy darkness, where he will rest until the stars fade once again, and the quiet cycle begins.